Hi, this is Dovid Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, we're happy to have you along. And there's a special sponsorship this week. This show is sponsored in honor of Rabbi Orlofsky's 100th show. My gosh, I didn't realize this was 100th show. That's very important because once a show goes into 100 episodes, it's then available for syndication. I hope you know that. So now you're going to find this like on Channel 9 at 10 o'clock at night. But be that as may. Le'iloi Nishmas Rivka Bas Abraham by Moshe and Razel Grossman and family, dear friends. Love you. We are so happy that you have this milestone. May you continue to be zoiche to inspire Klal Yisrael. And I've said it before, and I guess this is a great opportunity to reiterate it. I cannot thank you enough to everybody who listens, including the people who really, really don't seem to like me. And I get a few. I'll be fair. The overwhelming amount of messages that I've received on this topic of Aliyah has been overwhelmingly positive. People say, that's exactly my experience, or thank you for raising this point, I hadn't considered it. And people raised other points, could you talk about this or talk about this? And then there are the Miraglim people. Let me explain something to you, okay? Abuse doesn't work on me. It doesn't work. I've been insulted by professionals. My rebbeim used to go schmet to me all the time. There's nothing you're going to say that's going to get inside of me. I've been beaten up by professionals. I was once in the middle of a controversy. I know it seems hard to believe. I was once in the middle of a controversy, and somebody writes to me, goes, who do you think you are? You're nothing but a third-rate seminary teacher. I said, that's not an insult, that's a job description. And no, not even that. So calling me names and stuff and accusing me and telling me how I'm going to go to Gehenna and all this kind, it doesn't work on me. You're making a mistake. It's one or two people. I have to turn this off in the middle. Then don't watch it. I think it's so great. People watch it so that they can tell me how much they don't like it. It's unbelievable. I was going to write a book once, controversial sort of a book, and then I was going to write the article condemning it. Because I figured, why should somebody else make a few bucks off of my book? Condemning my book, I'll condemn it myself. Because I'll get money for the book and I'll get money for the condemnation article. It's gewaltig. My dear friend and mentor, the legendary Rabbi Mendy Gopin, who I am so touched, watches this podcast. And he calls me up afterwards to share his observations. So he said to me once, next time somebody calls you the Miraglim, tell him, Kalev and Yoshua didn't deny that there are problems. They didn't deny that there are problems. Of course there are problems. Yeah. The question is, can we do it? And that's the point. And there are people who have been writing me and saying, well, why don't you say something positive? So, full disclosure, I did an entire video years ago about the importance of making Aliyah. Yeah, I said this in the first podcast, but people don't listen that closely. People, man hears what they want to hear and disregard the rest. La 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 la. That's just the reality. So people didn't listen when I said this. I said there are tens of thousands of people who are now considering Aliyah. That's who this series is for. If you want to hear the arguments to make Aliyah, it's on YouTube someplace. I don't know exactly where the recording is. I'm sure now that I say this, Michael will put on a link because he is just the best. I am surrounded by so many wonderful, wonderful people. I have a truly, truly gifted life. I have nothing to complain about. Yeah, I do, because Evidently, there's a lot of people like to watch that, but Baruch Hashem. So I'm sure Michael will put up the link for you. And I explain why it's a mitzvah aseh, it's mekuyim, and why it's important and why you have to do it. But the point that I made there was you have to consider whether or not to make Aliyah. And it could be that consideration is, it's not correct for me, where I am at this point, right? So the crazies out there writing me, oh, anyone who lives in Chutz La'aretz, they don't have a God, you're Oved Avodah Zarah. Rav Moshe Feinstein wasn't an Oved Avodah Zarah. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky was not an Oved Avodah Zarah. Rav Aaron Kotler was not an Oved Avodah Zarah. Yeah, just don't, okay? Just don't go there. We're not Oved Avodah Zarah, okay? So, it's like this, single-minded. So I'll give you an example. There are 3 things you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael for: a shidduch, parnasa, and to learn Torah. Which means that in the absolute set of values, learning Torah is more important than living in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah. Having said that, there are people out there who will tell you, all you're supposed to do is sit and learn in Steig, and you're not supposed to do anything else. No, don't waste your time learning, working. Don't worry about this. Just sit and learn. Just sit and learn. Whatever your problem is, sit and learn. And Mesiras Nefesh just for learning. But listen, I'm going to let you know a little secret. Not everybody's cut out for learning. I know you're not allowed to say it today. But there are some people who aren't. When I was a Chavetz Chaim, the Rosh Hashiva of Henoch Leibowitz, I used to see when he would go with certain people and say, listen, this is not for you. You should be doing something else. Nobody said there in yeshiva. Some people took the advice and some people didn't. But, Talmud Torah. So when I say Talmud Torah K'neged Kulam and sitting and learning is, but that's not for everybody. You have to know who you are. You got to be real. Want to hear a terrible story? Sure you do. Why else would you be watching this podcast? A guy goes to his Rebbe and he says, listen, I don't know what to do. I went out with a girl and she says to me, why do you want to sit and learn? I didn't know what why do you want to get married? That was the question. Why do you want to get married? And I don't know what to tell her. So he says, tell her because I'm sick and tired of taking. My whole life I took. I took from my parents. I took from my rebbeim. I took from my chaverim. And now I want to give. Beautiful answer. Yeah, works well in a date. 9 out of 10 times it's not true, but it's definitely a great line. Yeah. So the boy says, let me think about it. And he comes back and he says, I can't say it. He says, why not? He says, because it's not true. He says, so why do you want to get married? He says, because everyone knows you won't get a quality girl unless you're in yeshiva. So I have to stay here till I get married, and then I can leave and go into my father's business. You understand? Not everybody's cut out for this. Just let's call a spade. So Eretz Yisrael is an unbelievable thing. You don't have to tell me I'm living here for 32 years. But you got to be real. I got a heartbreaking email from somebody who said, I wish I had heard all this before I made Aliyah. We made Aliyah with our family, and we couldn't make a living, and then the kids got messed up in school and all these different problems, and we ended up going back to America, and every kid has a problem now. So, okay, so I have these people who write me and say, no, we moved here and everything's great and everything's fine and the schools are wonderful and the parnasa is wonderful and the driving is nice. The people are sweet. Everything is terrific. Baruch Hashem. I can't tell you that never happens. That's wonderful. Yeah. But that wasn't the overwhelming amount of emails that I received. The overwhelming amount were, I'm glad you raised these points. Listen, to the best of my ability, I'm never going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't believe in it. Not to sell a cause. I think I told this story once. I heard it from on a tape from Rabbi Reisman, where it was in one of his Navi shiurim. He told the story. He says, a woman sent me a kol koreh and asked me to announce it, that the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael asered ponytail sheitlach. He says, I don't really know anything about sheitlach. If you told me that a ponytail sheitel is more tzenua because it covers the back of the neck, I would believe you too. I don't know. But I recognized some of the names who were signed, and I called them up, and they said, Sheker v'chazov, it never happened. Never happened. She calls up the lady and says, this letter is a forgery. So she says, all right, if you don't want to announce it, at least don't speak against it. So he says to his Navi share of 1,000 people, so I'm not speaking against it. Yeah. So am I going to tell you that you should do this because everyone has to move to Eretz Yisrael and everybody has to live here and everybody? No, not everybody can make it. Let's be real. Not everyone can make it in learning. Not everyone can make it in Eretz Yisrael. You got to be real, and I'm a big believer in that. You don't do anybody a favor by lying to them and pretending that there's no problems. There are problems. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to overcome the problems. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to face the problems. But to pretend there are no problems and everything's great and everything's terrific and there's no problems, it infuriates me when I see people do this to other people. I met a young couple. You know, the two sides of the family managed to buy them an apartment. You know, they were paying off a mortgage, and he was sitting and learning, and there was no money. So he says to his Rebbe, what do I do? So they told him, they said, okay, so sell your apartment so you can learn Torah. And he did, and eventually that money ran out. I had nothing. I'm now telling you, it's a beautiful story of Mesiras Nefesh, and if the people are happy, that's great. If they're happy. Shiva Chavetz Chaim once at a Chavetz Chaim convention, somebody asked the question, they said, what do you do if the job gets overwhelming and all the responsibilities are overwhelming, you know, and you're just not happy. You're not happy doing it. So the Rosh Yeshiva said, unbelievable, this is the mind of a gadol. The Rosh Yeshiva said, if there are things that every now and then get you down, that's the Eitz Hara. But if you're constantly not happy, now I have to give some background. Rav Dovid Leibowitz was sent to America by the Chavetz Chaim to save American Judaism, save Jewry in America. That was his mission. And he gave his life for it. According to many people, he got sick, and from all the machlekes and all the problems, he died very young. And his son, Rav Henoch, took over, and he ran the yeshiva with tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. And his only goal was to try to fulfill his father's mission that he got from the Chavetz Chaim to be Marvetz Torah. And we were brought up with those values. In Chavetz Chaim, if you, I don't know about today, like I'm talking about, I'm out of the yeshiva many years, but if you don't go to a Habatzis HaTorah, you have some explaining to do, Lucy. It's expected of you. You're gonna go out and go to be Marvetz Torah. Yeah, so to him, Habatzis HaTorah, saving American Jewry, was a priority. And he said, but if you're not happy, leave the field. Because you have to be happy. You have to be happy. So if everything works out great, Matov Manayim, that's terrific. I said this before, I'm sure in an earlier podcast, but definitely bears repetition. Rabbi Yaakov Horowitz, one of the mainstays of American chinuch, he wrote an article once that I read. He said, people ask, how's Klal Yisrael? What's going? How is things? And I said, it's like a chasana. If you're in the middle circle with the chassan and you're dancing, it's gewaldig. You move to the next circle, it's also good because you keep trying to get into the main circle. It says, then you're in the third circle, the old people schlepping along. You're not so much dancing as undulating. Then there are people who are standing by the side. Then there are people sitting at the table. And then there are people outside talking on their cell phones. So if you're in the middle circle, it's leibendig and it's gewaldig, even in the second circle. And I always point out the circles are concentric. So as you move out from the center, they get bigger. So I have these people who say to me, everything's great and everything's terrific and everybody's happy and everything's fine and everything's good and I don't know what you're hacking about. What are you making trouble for? And I said, I'll tell you why, because I sit at the tables. I watch other people at the tables and I see the people outside on their cell phones and I see the people schlepping around. Those are the circles that I see. Those are the circles that I dance in. I very seldom make it into the center circle. Yeah. So, so you say, how is everything going? So if you come and everything goes well, somebody wrote me, my parents made Aliya, so it was my uncle, I think. I may be misquoting. I don't have it in front of me. Yeah. So one of the things they gave him was a nefesh b'nefesh bag. Yeah. And he used to carry it around with him. And finally, one storekeeper said, when we see that bag, we overcharge you. You know that, right? Now, for those of you who call me the Meraglim, that never happened. The whole thing is a lie. I'm sure this person's lying in their email. It never happened. Because anything that I don't like, I have to pretend it doesn't exist. And if you say anything that's true but negative, you're the Meraglim. But would I be okay to tell you that don't carry around your nefesh b'nefesh bag? Based on this story, would that be okay? Yeah. Anyway, I said at the very beginning of this series, I'm talking to the tens of thousands who are considering Aliyah. I'm not talking to the people who aren't considering Aliyah. That's not who this is for. I'm not selling Aliyah. Like I told you, if you want to see that, go watch the other video. I'm saying that if you're making this, go in with your eyes wide open. Don't be stupid. Yeah. People go out, they go out dating, they see problems. Love will conquer all. No, it won't. It really doesn't. Every couple who ever got divorced would tell you that of course, this is the one. You don't spend that much money on one evening if you don't think this is gonna work. It's gonna be walking with your eyes wide open. You gotta be honest. This is coming from a tummy. You understand? It took me many, many years to get like this. I was not this way. I'm still not be'etzim. Right? Say the Chazal. Honor everybody, but be suspicious. Be suspicious. So that's the points that I'm trying to make over here. And like I tell you, I'm living here for all these years. And I think it's such a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. But if a person is worried that I'm not going to be able to take care of my kids, or a person is worried that I'm not going to be able to make a parnasa, or people are worried that I'm going to be in a society where I'm going to have all kinds of problems. I got emails like that too, echoing what I said. Listen, and to those 2 or 3 people who write me, who think I'm a Meraglim, yeah, I don't even know why I waste my time speaking to you. I really don't. You're a waste of time. And I say that with love in my heart, It's just you're like this. You just don't get it. You just don't get it. Yeah? And you say to me, I came and everything was great and everything was fine. Good. You're like those people I meet at the parenting seminars where parents are struggling with their children and there's always one parent who says, you just have to set boundaries. I tell my daughter we don't do that in our family, and she says, okay, mommy. And I tell her that she can't wear this, and I tell her this, and I tell her that. Whenever I tell her, she says, okay, mommy. Wow, you are such a brilliant mechanechet. Did you think, you guessed that? So you came with this great idea. I tell my daughter no, and she says, okay. Hey, welcome to reality. Sometimes you tell your kids, I'm like, oh, no, too bad. But you can't pretend that doesn't happen. Anyway, I'm sorry. I don't know why I get myself excited. There's no point to it. There's no point to it. I'm here for the major majority of people who are seriously thinking of making this move, and I want you to come in with your eyes wide open. I'm not trying to discourage people, but I'm trying to inform people. And one person had what I thought was a very good idea. They said, okay, so you pointed out certain problems that exist in the chinuch system. So what are the options? Maybe you could bring somebody on to discuss the current options, because I will be, full disclosure, I don't know all the options that exist all around the country right now in all the chinuch things, and that's an excellent idea. I think we will do that. Yeah. But for now, I want to address another problem. And two people wrote me specifically about this problem and asked if I was going to address it, and I had in mind to address it, and that's the following. I made reference to this when I was talking about the chinuch system, about the fact that there are tensions between Sephardim and Ashkenaz. It's not as bad as it was once upon a time, but there is definitely a sense, I'm full disclosure, being honest, there is definitely a sense among some areas of the Ashkenazi community to look down upon the Sephardi community. That is just a reality. Yeah? And it's not just in the religious community, it's in the secular community. That was one of the reasons Shas got started, because they felt that they were being discriminated against in Israeli society. There were terrible stories that happened to Sephardic Jewry when they first came across by the Ashkenazi people in power. And these tensions lie there. And that was, what the Shas party basically came along to address, the fact that not just religious Sephardim who suffer, but most Sephardim are very traditional. And because of that, the Haskalah didn't hit them the way that it did Ashkenazi Jewry. And so there's a lot of tradition. You can see a guy who looks totally chiloni. I had a cab driver, just spiked hair, totally chiloni. And I was coming back late at night, and he says, "Radio mafriya lecha? The radio bother you if I put it on?" I said, "No." So he turns on a station that is broadcasting slichos. And he's singing along with the slichos. And I'm like, oh boy. So there are tensions. Now, there are people who will tell you that's because there really are differences. And one Sephardi individual wrote me and said, listen, that's because even among Sephardim there are hierarchies of observance, and we don't want, if we're of the more observant Sephardim and the ones who are more into things, we don't want to be around with the people who are not so into things. That was the feeling. And he's speaking again as a Sephardi. Anyway, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying it's a reality. I have a friend of mine who's Sephardi, and he says, he was thinking of moving to Israel. And I said, "You're not worried about any issues of discrimination?" And he says, "No, I'm rich." I said, "Well, that goes a long way." It definitely does. There's a lot of tension, and there is a tremendous amount of tension between the religious and the secular. I read an article about an American girl came to Israel. She was secular, and she wrote an article. She says there were 8 news stories. 7 of them were terrible stories about Haredim. The 8th one was about an earthquake. And I said, couldn't they find some way to pin that on the Haredim also? A secular American sociologist wrote a book called The Real Jews. And he says the level of hatred that he encountered, he couldn't believe it. And he says, I was looking at a collection of political cartoons of Haredim that were right out of the Sturma. They were the anti-Semitic caricatures that anti-Semites have used throughout history. And they were being used about the Haredim. And listen, they presented in the Knesset recently a video of the difference of how the police are enforcing the corona regulations among the religious and among the secular. And there was that painful video of this 13-year-old girl who lowered her mask, take a drink, and two police run over and start abusing her until she burst into tears. And when they saw people were filming, they drove away. She's sitting there with her two younger siblings, one in a carriage. And they juxtapose that with pictures of policemen in secular neighborhoods giving out masks. Now, this is not surprising to us. Well, I mean, we live here. We live here. There was a rally some years ago against the oppression against the religious Jews. And I remember seeing an interview on Israeli television, and they said, these people are the forces of darkness. They represent darkness. In The Real Jews, he tells a story. He says, they were making a minyan at the back of the plane. He said, so I had to push past them to get to the bathroom. I said, okay, inconvenience. I'll be inconvenienced for people, even though I'm not religious, and And one of the stewards looks at me and he says, I'll open the door, you push him out. Mm-hmm. I thought to myself, who talks that way? Mm-hmm. Who talks that way? Well, why would you say that about another Jew? So the levels of hostility are tremendous. Tremendous. A friend of mine, Chesky Goldberg, he was on a bus that was blown up by a terrorist. But he went to represent Israel in a trip to the Federation, United Federations. And so the group meets beforehand so they could all get together. And he sensed there was tension because he was a Haredim. He says, why don't you like Haredim? And they said, Haredim are this, or Haredim are that, or Haredim are that. And he went through the whole list. And then he says, how many Haredim have you met? They said, including you? Yeah, one. He says, and am I like that? No, you're the exception. How do you know? You haven't met any. I was going to speak at a birthright group, and they said to me, leave your hat in the car. And I said, if my hat stays in the car, I stay in the car too. He said, no, it's just when these people see a black hat, they make an association. I said, I know. And that's what I'm trying to dispel. It's painful, painful. I'll tell you the most incredible thing. The same Israeli who will ignore me at best and abuse me at worst in this country. When I go to America and I meet them in Walmart or in Target, oh, shalom, אתה מהארץ, כן, גם אנחנו, איפה אתם, they're my best friends in the world. It's an amazing thing. And there are many stories of Israelis who move to America and they want their kids to learn Hebrew, so they end up sending them to the local day school. They end up joining the synagogue because they want to have some kind of Jewish life. Here, they don't have that problem. And suddenly their attitudes begin to change. It's an amazing thing. So between the religious and the secular, between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim, and not so much anymore, but once upon a time between even between what they call the Litvische, Yeshivische group and the Hasidic group, there used to be these kind of fights, and now it's not so much. There was a time when Degel Torah broke off from a good, I think it was 1992 or something. There was all kinds of tensions like that, but you don't really see that today. But a little bit, definitely among sometimes Hasidic groups on their own, there could be fights and arguments and and problems. But okay, that they have in America too. But there's this, and the thing is that whatever it is, Israelis ramp it up. They move it up to a 10. Now, there's a reason for that. Israel is very intense. I mean that in the best way. Yeah. It's described as a land of hills and valleys. And as somebody said, well, you're either going up or you're going down. But you don't stay in the same place. Yeah. My wife comes from Kew Garden Hills. The difference between the hills in Kew Garden Hills and the hills in the Har Nof is unbelievable. Here you need equipment to get from one side of the neighborhood to the other. My wife went to seminary in Bayit Vagan, and when we first moved here, I had checked out the neighborhood beforehand, and she's looking around the neighborhood. She says, the support walls here are larger than the buildings we had in Bayit Vagan. There's ups and downs. There's no question about it. Life here is very intense. Listen, it's very much life and death here. So many of the people are in the army, and like I say, I have a friend of mine who was on a bus that got blown up, terrorist attacks. I live in Har Nof. Up the street from me was the shul where these terrorists came in and started stabbing and shooting. It's right up the block from me. I know the people. It's amazing. So yeah, life is very real here. I'll tell you a story. I grew up in New York, and I moved out to LA for a couple of years. Again, this was in the late 70s. I don't know what LA is today, but when I moved out there, New York was in the middle of a blizzard. And I come out to LA, it's in the 70s. There were palm trees. I was staying in a hotel near the airport, so this was kind of a bad neighborhood. There were birds of paradise plants growing. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I rented an apartment, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment, furnished, which of course meant that we had a hanging wicker chair, it's a beanbag in the corner, It was so cool. I was so happening. 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, furnished apartment with utilities, $310 a month. I had a roommate, so I only had to pay $155. But it was, and so many of the apartment buildings, I won't say all of them, I don't want to generalize, but many of the apartment buildings were built like a motel. There was a big pool, and the building was like a U around it, and your apartment was these little doors to go into, and it looked just like a motel. And somebody told me that the furniture on the West Coast, in LA, is 40% lighter than the ones in the East, because people move so much. So the furniture's lighter. A lot of wicker, I guess. I don't know. But I said, compared to New York, LA was like just an extension of Disneyland. Everything was really beautiful green grass and trees, and it all looked like a Hollywood set. It looked like they were just going to roll it up and take it away. I don't know what it's like today, but when I was there, it was amazing. So I said that I felt New York was much more real. So I come to Eretz Yisrael, and trials and tribulations. Don't get me wrong, I don't regret it at all. Not for one day, with all the problems. I just wish I had known beforehand what I was getting into, but of course, that would require advanced planning. When I left, my house was, my brother Bruce, who's a tzaddik, who has never denied it, but I was under the impression that my father on his deathbed said, take care of David because he can't handle anything himself. I've asked him this directly. He's never answered it, but, he says, I came into your house after you left, after you moved to Israel, yeah? And it looked like a crack house that just got to call the police on the way. There was food in the freezer, there was food in the refrigerator, like a cigarette burning in an ashtray. It was like everyone just picked up their stuff and ran. To a certain extent, that was true. Well, we didn't do a lot of planning. It wasn't. If I would do it over again today, of course, it would be different. I would at least plan and then probably do exactly what I did. But at least I would plan it. But so I had no idea. Anyway, one time I'm in a camp, and the cab driver says, "Which hotel are you in?" And I said, "I need Garpo. אתה חושב שאני אמריקאי? אני ישראלי. למה אתה חושב שאני אמריקאי?" And if you don't know what I'm saying, just put on Google Translate or whatever. And he says to me, "You live here? אתה משוגע? Are you crazy?" He says, "I'm doing everything I can to get a green card to get out of here. And you moved here? Why would you move here?" So I went to the Hebrew Academy of Nassau County. It was a good Zionist school. So I just, I knew my speech already, started humming Hatikva in the background. The Jews are returning to their land. The children are coming home. Yeah, the land is our land, So he says, but there's the wars, and there's the terrorist attacks, and there's the crime, and there's the economy. It's so difficult here. So I told him my story about LA and New York. And I said, real life is always harder than make-believe. That's one of the reasons that we don't believe in a honeymoon, right? A honeymoon, you have the wedding, the two of you get on a plane, and you go off to Disneyland or Club Med, and you have a great vacation. Then you come home and you're like, oh my gosh. We don't do that in Judaism. We make you stay home, surrounded by friends and family, in small, overheated apartments with little plastic chairs that are all next to each other, eating burekas and parva ice cream. You understand? People making long, droning speeches. Why? Because when you're in trouble, those are the people who are going to be there for you. Mickey Mouse isn't going to come and help you. It's your family and friends. That's what reality is. We try to be very based in reality. So I said, real life is always harder. Anyway, we pass a chassid on the street, and he says, "You see him? He hates my guts." I said, "I don't know if he does or he doesn't, but I know that I have a brother who hates my guts, but I would give up my life for him." And he turns, which is unfortunate because he's driving. He turns and he looks at me and he says, "And I would give up my life for him." And I said, "We are one sick, dysfunctional family." Yeah, there's a lot of tensions in society. But when I go back to America and everybody's very polite to me, I know that they would kill me in a second. And that's why I always say, let the person who hates me be a Jew. Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim. Yeah. Jews have a certain Rachmanis that you just don't find. I was on a Neged bus, and he stops in the middle of the street, and the people in the back are screaming, "Nag, nag, Mecca, Mecca," and the people in the front are, "Shake it, shake it." And I was like, "Gosh, what's going on?" So I look out the window. It's hard to believe this would happen in any other country. Maybe it would. Can't say. The driver stopped, and there was a blind man. He stopped in front of his house and walked him to the street, walked him to the sidewalk, and got back into the car. When I came here in 1975, a pregnant woman walked onto the bus. An older person walked on the bus. You jumped up immediately and gave him your seat. It wasn't even a question. Like I say, things have changed. We're catching up to other countries. A friend of mine was on a bus, and this pregnant woman comes on, and she's standing there. So then the hug stops the bus and goes, "Here, lady, take my seat." So someone's like, okay, sit down. Listen, I've got terrible stories with naked bus drivers also. I can tell you terrible stories too. But there's something about, yes, are we a dysfunctional? We are. Let me tell you something. Grave desecration, bad thing. 100%. Yeah. In most countries in the world, grave desecration is illegal. In Israel, you're allowed to desecrate graves if they're old and they're in the way. There was a story here in Israel where they came on an old Jewish graveyard, and the chief rabbi of Jerusalem had been brought into Germany because they found an old Jewish graveyard where they were going to build a mall. And they called him the chief rabbi, and he says, you can build it, but you're going to have to put it on stilts, and you'll have to do it like this, and the whole thing. And they said, it's going to add to our cost, but we'll do it not to desecrate a graveyard. So they were building a highway here in Yerushalayim, and they came to a graveyard. So Teddy Kollek says, I'm as good as the Germans. I'll bring in the chief rabbi to decide. So he studied the problem, and he says, you can build the overpass, but you're going to have to move it here, and you have to do this. And Teddy Kollek says, forget it. Came in the middle of the night, broke up all the graves, took all the bones, put them in sacks, took them off to the Rockefeller Museum. The Supreme Court paskined here in Israel that a Jewish cemetery is not a holy spot. You could take the bones out. It was so interesting when this took place. So somebody went over and threw paint on Yitzchak Rabin's grave. They arrested him, and the guy said, "How long does someone have to be dead before it's okay to desecrate their grave?" Anyway, this is a uniquely Israeli experience. So they were doing construction by a graveyard, and there was a demonstration, and the police came in, and I have to tell you this is documented. Go on online and check it out. Israeli police are very violent. They are. There was a guy who was in a right-wing demonstration, and it was filmed. The policeman stuck 2 fingers in his nose and ripped it open. It was filmed. I was teaching in a yeshiva, and this is when there were demonstrations on Bar Ilan, and these guys were coming back from Shabbos, and a van. They weren't even in Bar Ilan; they were on the side street. And this van of policemen come up with billy clubs and start beating them. It's just Metzias. In the demonstrations just now in Ramema, somebody said to the cop, why aren't you wearing a mask? And the guy punched him in the face. It's a video about police brutality. Yeah. So they started carrying signs, Haredi Lives Matter. But there was a certain level of violence. Anyway, so these people are demonstrating. Oh, the police van comes in. They start beating them with clubs, throw them into the van, drag them off to jail. But here's the thing. These people who are protesting grave desecration are also part of the organization that when there's a terrorist attack, they collect the body parts because they take a Jewish death very seriously, whether the person's already dead or has to be buried. True story. So they beat up these guys, throw them in the van, take them to jail, and then there's a terrorist attack. So the policemen take them out of jail, put police vests on them, put them back into the same van, and drive them to the terrorist site to collect the body parts, knowing that tomorrow we'll just switch sides again. It's crazy. It's crazy. I think it was Matti Berger who observed, in America there are 2 parties. In England there are 3, 4 parties. In Israel there are 20 parties. 4 right-wing parties, 3 religious parties, 3 left-wing parties. Nobody can get along. There's this tremendous amount of tension. And For people who are more easygoing, it's rough. It's rough. Now, I have to say, to a certain extent, the more Americans move here, the more the sensibilities are changing, because we're by nature more tolerant. We're more tolerant, and we don't get that. Now, some people obviously do, right? Right, the 2 or 3 crazies who keep writing me hate mail, obviously, they become very Israelized. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know that. Americans, we have much more of a live and let live kind of an attitude. Sometimes it changes with the generations, but there's a certain culture that comes with that. So these tensions exist; they're real, and it's painful. It's painful when you see kids walking down the street and they run away from the police because they're afraid of them. You know, Officer Joe, walking down the street twirling his billy club. Hey there, Billy! And here, they might just come over and punch you in the face or beat you with a billy club. You weren't even doing anything. It changes perspectives. So that's rough. It's a rough thing. Now, things are changing. Things are getting better. There's no question about it. But people who are soft-hearted might find it a little rough. Like I say, Rav Henoch always used to say to me, one person changes the world. Avraham Avinu was one person, he changed the world. Rabbi Salanta was one person. One person can change the world. And we can make the world a better place, and we can make Israel a warmer, more tolerant place. But if you're coming in like Tomim, it's interesting that in Israel, Tomim is a bad word. He's a Tomim. He doesn't know any better. Yeah. You gotta know. You gotta know that there are certain problems that exist in society. And I've got some more to talk about next week. But I do think that's an excellent suggestion that we're going to bring in some professionals to talk about the current situation in Israel vis-a-vis these different issues. And again, I'm only here to let people know that there are issues, not to say therefore I don't have to consider it. Of course you have to consider it. That's why I'm talking to people considering it, and they ask me, what do I have to be afraid of? What should I take into account? Yeah. So we're talking about issues. And that's it. I went over time. I don't know why I went over time. So everyone should be well, stay well, and what can I tell you? As they say in Motel 6, we'll leave the lights on for you. So if you feel like I really want to make my life here in Israel, then there are no obstacles. There are no problems. There are challenges that we need to overcome. But if you're not so gung-ho, then you should know beforehand that there are issues, and make sure that you're prepared. Okay, that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to Realism.com. You can make a comment. You can contact me. You can sponsor an episode. And you can, after Tisha B'Av, you can listen to the jingle. And that's it for now. My name is Dovid Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.